Managing risk in an organization has many different facets: personnel risk, IT security risks, and third-party risk management. Many times organizations don't specialize in every aspect of a product or service that they offer for their customers, and so they need to outsource some of that skill set, that expertise. And that's where third-party risk management comes in. Now, one form is in measurement systems analysis, or MSA. Now, this is a quality assurance type of performance metric that is used often in industry. So if we have robotic equipment that needs to be recalibrated when manufacturing items on an assembly line, for example, then we want to make sure if that is the third-party skill set that we are outsourcing to, we need to make sure that they are doing what they need to do from a security perspective to secure that environment. We'll cover a lot more on that when we talk about SCADA and industrial control systems. So recalibrating parameters for robotic machinery would be an example of doing that in a vehicle tire production plant. So there are other risks related to software third-party items that are outsourced. If you think about it, all of the IT solutions that we use depend on hardware and software sourced from organizations that build those things, whether they're from other nations or within our own country. So we have to think about not using products, so hardware and software, that are no longer supported. Those items that have reached end of life, EOL, or end of service life, EOSL, same thing. Interestingly, even some recent media reports about hacking that have taken place are the result of using outdated operating systems that are no longer even supported, for example, by Microsoft. So usually the problem is that there's not enough budget or time to scour through the network, discover these outdated operating systems in this example, to get them up to date. Then we have to think about cloud service providers, because these days cloud computing is ubiquitous at the personal level as well as at the enterprise level. So what about cloud security providers? Do they give us enough security? A lot of people are of the opinion that you're better off securing your data on your own network and that it's safer than a public cloud provider, only because a public cloud provider is a bigger target. But that's like saying you're better off storing your money in your mattress than in a bank, because a bank is a bigger target. Public cloud service providers have a lot to lose if their environments can't be trusted. So why don't we take a look at Amazon Web Services security accreditations? So here in my web browser, I've navigated to the AWS compliance programs. We've already come across a lot of these things in our discussion so far. The Cloud Security Alliance, or CSA, remember, they generate the Cloud Controls Matrix, or the CCM. Then a number of ISO certifications, PCI DSS. And as we go down through here, all kinds of other different certifications that AWS has, which means that they have a level or a degree of competency in securing their environment. But you know what's interesting about this, from a responsibility standpoint, is if we take a look at PCI DSS, so for the credit card information or the debit card information that we might be working with, just because a public cloud provider might be PCI DSS compliant, that doesn't mean that automatically anything that we do in that cloud provider is also PCI DSS compliant. So it's a two-way street. The cloud provider bears some of the responsibility for compliance, as do we, the cloud consumers. Other supply chain security risks would involve the use of contractors. Contractors might come on premises or remotely access corporate resources using their laptops or smartphones, which means they need temporary signing credentials. There is a risk in letting those people into our network. However, if it's managed accordingly, it's usually fine because it happens all of the time. We want to make sure we have data privacy notices that might pop up, for instance, if we have a contractor signing into a VPN and accessing what might be sensitive information. We have to think about company mergers and linking those organizations together. The company merger process can be very, very complicated, and often a lot of items fall through the cracks. And what I mean by that is having a bunch of servers, perhaps that are no longer needed, that haven't been patched in years, that are still up and running, either on premises or in the cloud. During the kerfuffle involved with the company merger, they kind of got forgotten about. And sometimes that does happen. And then there's software developers that are writing code. We want to make sure that when developers are writing code, while it makes sense that they reuse components, even from third parties, that those third parties are trusted. Developers don't want to reinvent the wheel and write code from scratch. They want to reuse things, but we want to make sure it's only from trusted sources. So we've already described that a public cloud provider presents a third-party outsourcing risk. We are outsourcing some of our IT needs to them. Well, let's take a look at what we can do about that in the case of Microsoft Azure storage accounts. Here in the Microsoft Azure portal, I'm going to get a list of my storage accounts. A storage account is an enterprise storage repository in the Azure cloud. What's interesting is that by default, it is encrypted. So you've got protection for your data at rest, but it's encrypted with keys that are generated and managed by Microsoft. And so sometimes for regulatory compliance, you need to control the keys. And so we're going to take a look at how we're going to use customer managed keys to enable encryption of data at rest for a storage account in Azure. So I'm going to open up the properties of one of my existing storage accounts, and we're going to take a look at the current state of encryption for that storage account, because what we're going to see is it's done with Microsoft managed keys. So on the left in the navigation bar, I'm just going to scroll down to, as you might guess, encryption. And over on the right, sure enough, the encryption type is currently set to Microsoft managed keys. Now, for regulatory compliance, you might have to control those keys, so you would simply choose customer managed keys. Now down below, I can select a key that I've generated previously. I have set this up for what's called a key vault. You might guess that's a safe storage location for things like encryption keys in the Azure cloud. So if I choose the select a key vault and key link, it's just a matter of choosing the right items from the list, beginning with the key vault and then a key within it that I want to use to encrypt my account. So from here, I would choose the appropriate key vault from the drop-down list. And within that, I would then simply choose the storage account key that I want to use. And after I've made my selection, that's the key that will be used. It's under my control. That key will be used to protect data at rest in the Microsoft Azure cloud. Another thing that we can do about unauthorized data sharing is prevent it from happening in the first place. And we can do that with data loss prevention, or DLP. So sometimes we'll have insiders that intentionally or unintentionally make sensitive data in the organization available to external parties. So with DLP, what we're talking about doing is creating data loss prevention policies that might stipulate, for example, that any documents in Microsoft Word created from a specific template will automatically have a watermark in the background, and that the document must be encrypted before it can be attached to an email message. And there are plenty of solutions to choose from, software DLP solutions that run both on-premises and also in the cloud. So managing third-party risk then means thinking about the hardware and software components that you're using in the enterprise, and also where data resides and how that data is protected from data exfiltration.